There should have been laws against thinking about one's bodyguard this much. If there were, I would have been guilty of violating several of them. Repeatedly. Every day. Not that I was counting. I was absolutely counting. The realization was deeply embarrassing. Especially because Kelo remained completely unaware of the effect he had on me. Or perhaps he was aware and simply too polite to mention it. I wasn't sure which possibility was worse. Your Majesty. I blinked. The council chamber returned. Lord Oral stood near the center of the room, looking mildly confused. Apparently he had asked me a question. Wonderful. I had spent so much time staring in Kelo's direction that I had completely stopped listening. A truly kingly display. My apologies, I said. Could you repeat that? Several counselors exchanged knowing looks. I ignored them. Lord Oral cleared his throat. The trade proposal from the Western provinces. Right. Trade. The thing we were supposed to be discussing. Not Kelo. Definitely not Kelo. I forced my attention back to the meeting. The proposal is acceptable. The council resumed its discussion. I immediately regretted speaking. Because now I had no excuse to glance toward the wall where Kelo stood. Not that it stopped me. The man looked exactly as he always did. Calm. Alert. Professional. It was honestly impressive. No matter what happened around him, Kelo never seemed rattled. I envied that. Being king meant constantly pretending to be composed. Kelo actually was composed. The distinction mattered. An hour later the meeting finally ended. I escaped before anyone could start another discussion about marriage. Unfortunately, that freedom lasted approximately 3 minutes. Running away again. Princess Kiara's voice carried down the corridor. I turned. The princess approached with a smile that immediately made me suspicious. Over the past few days, I had learned something important. Kiara was dangerous. Not politically. Personally. Because she was clever enough to notice things. And once she noticed something, she never let it go. I wasn't running. You were absolutely running. I was walking. Very quickly. I sighed. Kiara laughed. Gods help me. The woman was impossible. Strangely enough, I liked her. Not romantically. Not even remotely. But as a person. Yes. Far more than I had expected. She was intelligent. Funny. Blunt when necessary. And unlike most nobles, she treated me like a human being instead of a political asset. It was refreshing. I assume you've come to torment me. Obviously. Excellent. Thank you. We continued walking through the corridor. Kelo followed several paces behind. Close enough to protect me. Far enough to provide privacy. Somehow he always knew exactly where to position himself. Another thing I found myself noticing far too often. Kiara glanced behind me. Then back at my face. Then behind me again. I immediately became nervous. A dangerous sign. Because Kiara only smiled like that when she was about to cause trouble. Your guard is very handsome. I nearly choked. The princess looked delighted. Your Highness. My mistake. Her grin widened. Sir Kelo is very handsome. I stared at her. She stared back. The woman had absolutely no fear. Unfortunately. After several painful seconds she finally laughed. You should see your face. I don't know what you're talking about. A shame. She sounded entirely unconvinced. I hated how observant she was. The rest of the walk passed peacefully. Or at least as peacefully as possible when accompanied by a princess determined to embarrass me. Eventually we reached one of the palace gardens. Kiara settled onto a stone bench. I remained standing. The afternoon sunlight filtered through flowering trees. Birds chirped somewhere overhead. For a brief moment, everything felt normal. Then the princess surprised me. "You're lonely." The words struck harder than they should have. I looked away. Toward the fountain. Toward the flowers. Toward literally anything except her face. Unfortunately, silence was answer enough. Kiara's expression softened. "I didn't mean that as an insult." "I know." The answer emerged quietly. Because she was right. I was lonely. Terribly lonely. The crown had many advantages. Companionship wasn't one of them. People bowed. People obeyed. People praised. Very few people connected. Not genuinely. Not anymore. "I had a brother once," Kiara said softly. I looked back toward her. She smiled sadly. "He wasn't supposed to inherit." The statement caught my attention immediately. Because it sounded familiar. Too familiar. "He died 3 years ago." "I'm sorry." "So am I." The princess folded her hands together. "The point is, grief changes things." Her gaze met mine. "You don't have to carry everything alone." For several seconds neither of us spoke. Then I laughed quietly. "That sounds suspiciously wise." "I am wise." "Of course. Exceptionally wise." I rolled my eyes. The princess looked pleased with herself. The moment passed. Yet her words lingered. "You don't have to carry everything alone." It was simple. It was reasonable. But yet it was difficult. Because trusting people wasn't easy anymore. Not after the war. Not after the funerals. Not after inheriting a kingdom I was never supposed to rule. Trust required vulnerability. And vulnerability was dangerous. At least that was what I had always believed. The following week brought preparations for the royal hunt. One of my least favorite traditions. Unfortunately, the nobles loved it. Royal hunts provided opportunities for diplomacy. Networking. Political maneuvering. In other words, everything I tried desperately to avoid. Yet attendance was expected. So attendance it would be. The hunting party gathered before sunrise. Nobles mounted horses. Servants prepared supplies. Soldiers checked equipment. The entire palace seemed awake despite the early hour. I adjusted my gloves and approached my horse. Immediately Kelo appeared. As if summoned by magic. Or anxiety. Possibly both. "Your horse has already been checked." I blinked. "You checked my horse?" "Twice." I smiled despite myself. "Thank you." A strange expression flickered across his face. Gone almost immediately. "Interesting. Very interesting." Before I could analyze it further, Lord Oral approached. "My king." I resisted the urge to sigh. "Lord Oral. The western hunting grounds have been prepared." "Excellent. The weather should remain favorable." "Excellent. The nobles are eager for today's event." That was significantly less excellent. I smiled politely anyway. Because diplomacy occasionally required lying. A trumpet sounded. The hunt was beginning. Riders gradually assembled. Princess Kiara joined us shortly afterward. Unlike many noblewomen, she looked genuinely excited. "I'm going to win." I laughed. "You haven't even started." Details. The princess mounted her horse. "Prepare yourself for defeat." Terrifying. I know. Kelo stood nearby throughout the exchange. Silent as always. Yet I thought I noticed amusement in his eyes. Or perhaps I imagined it. Either was possible. Eventually the hunting party departed. The palace disappeared behind us. Forests replaced stone walls. The morning air felt crisp and cool. For the first time in days, I felt something resembling freedom. No council meetings. No political negotiations. No endless discussions about marriage. Just trees. Fresh air. And a brief escape from responsibility. Unfortunately, peace rarely lasted long. Especially for kings. As we rode deeper into the forest, I couldn't shake a strange feeling. Not fear. Not exactly. More like anticipation. As though something important was about to happen. I glanced toward Kelo. He rode several yards away. Alert. Watchful. Focused on the surrounding forest. A professional. A protector. Someone I found myself trusting more each day. The realization caught me off guard. Because trust had become rare. Yet somehow Kelo had earned it. Without asking. Without trying. Without even realizing it. And perhaps that was the most dangerous thing of all. Because the more I trusted him, the harder it became to ignore what I felt whenever he was near. By midday, the hunt was in full swing. The forest echoed with the sounds of riders moving through the trees. Occasionally someone shouted after spotting game. Horses moved between narrow trails. Dogs barked in the distance. For most of the nobles, the hunt was less about hunting and more about impressing one another. Lord Marrow had already spent 20 minutes discussing a deer he claimed to have tracked. No one cared. Unfortunately, no one was willing to tell him that. Princess Kiara certainly looked tempted. I caught her making a face behind his back. It took every ounce of my self-control not to laugh. Gods! The woman was going to get me into trouble. The hunting party stopped near a clearing shortly afterward. Several nobles dismounted. Servants began preparing refreshments. A temporary rest before continuing deeper into the forest. I welcomed the break. The morning had been pleasant, but exhausting. Being surrounded by politicians in outdoor clothing was still being surrounded by politicians. No amount of fresh air changed that. I stepped away from the group and wandered toward a nearby stream. The sound of running water helped clear my thoughts. For a few precious moments, I was alone. Or so I thought. You wandered off. I smiled before turning around. Kelo. The night approached quietly. As always. I was beginning to suspect he could sneak up on wild animals if he truly wanted to. You make that sound like a crime. It is when you're the king. I sighed dramatically. There it is again. What? That thing everyone does. His eyebrows rose slightly. The thing where they remember I'm king every 5 seconds. To my surprise, Kelo laughed. A short laugh. A real one. The sound caught me completely off guard. I had never heard it before. And now I desperately wanted to hear it again. This was becoming a serious problem. Forgive me, Your Majesty. Now you're doing it on purpose. Possibly. I stared at him. He stared back. For a moment, something shifted between us. Not dramatically. Not obviously. Just enough to make me aware of how close we were standing. Close enough to notice the scar near his temple. Close enough to notice the faint flecks of gold hidden within his dark eyes. Close enough to make my heart behave in deeply unhelpful ways. Fortunately, Princess Kiara's voice interrupted before I could embarrass myself. There you are. The princess emerged from the trees. Looking entirely too pleased with herself. Am I interrupting something? No. The answer came far too quickly. Kiara's smile widened. Kelo looked confused. I considered throwing myself into the stream. The princess joined us beside the water. Lord Marrow is telling the deer story again. I groaned. Still. He somehow made it longer. A remarkable achievement. I thought so too. Kelo remained silent. Though I noticed the corner of his mouth twitching. Apparently even he found Lord Marrow exhausting. The realization amused me far more than it should have. The afternoon passed peacefully. At least for a while. The hunting party eventually divided into smaller groups. A common practice during royal hunts. More ground covered. Better chances of success. Normally there was little risk. Today would prove different. I found myself riding through a heavily wooded section of the forest with only a handful of people nearby. Kelo rode beside me. 2 soldiers followed behind. The atmosphere felt calm. Quiet. Safe. Then my horse suddenly became agitated. Its ears flattened. Its muscles tensed. Immediately my instincts sharpened. Something was wrong. Very wrong. Kelo. The knight was already moving. His hand dropped to his sword. His eyes scanned the forest. Every muscle in his body became alert. A heartbeat later, the attack came. An arrow exploded from the trees. Time seemed to slow. I saw the arrow. Saw its direction. Saw exactly where it was headed. My chest. The realization hit with terrifying clarity. I'm going to die. The thought barely formed before something slammed into me. Hard. I lost my grip on the reins. The world tilted. Then both Kelo and I crashed to the ground. Pain exploded through my shoulder. Leaves scattered everywhere. My horse bolted. Voices erupted around us. For several seconds I couldn't breathe. Then I realized what had happened. Kelo had thrown himself from his horse. Directly into me. The arrow flew past where I'd been sitting moments earlier. Missing me by inches. Perhaps less. Kelo. The knight was already on his feet. Sword drawn. Searching. Hunting. The expression on his face was unlike anything I had seen before. Cold. Focused. Dangerous. The expression of a man prepared to kill. There. One of the soldiers shouted. Movement flashed between the trees. A figure running. The attacker. Kelo took off immediately. Without hesitation. Without waiting for orders. I scrambled to my feet. Kelo. He didn't stop. The chase disappeared deeper into the forest. The remaining soldiers rushed toward me. Your Majesty. Are you injured? Did the arrow hit you? I'm fine. The answer sounded strange. Because it wasn't entirely true. My shoulder hurt. My heart was racing. And I had come terrifyingly close to death. Yet none of those things felt important right now. Only one thought mattered. Kelo. Minutes passed. Long, painful minutes. Eventually the knight returned. Alone. The expression on his face told me everything. He escaped. I exhaled slowly. Disappointment flashed across his features. As though he considered the outcome a personal failure. Ridiculous. The man had just saved my life. Kelo. His attention immediately shifted toward me. Are you hurt? The question surprised me. Of all the things he could have said. That was his first concern. No. Relief appeared briefly in his eyes. Gone almost immediately. But I saw it. I definitely saw it. The realization settled somewhere deep inside my chest. Warm. Dangerous. The hunting trip ended immediately. No one argued. An assassination attempt against the king had a way of ruining everyone's afternoon. By sunset we had returned to the palace. Chaos followed. Naturally. Council meetings. Security reviews. Investigations. Questions. So many questions. The nobles demanded answers. The guards demanded information. Everyone wanted certainty. Nobody had any. I endured it all. Hours of discussion. Hours of speculation. Hours of frustration. Finally, long after sunset, I escaped. Exhausted. Drained. Alive. The last thought felt strangely significant. Because I shouldn't have been. Not without Kelo. A quiet knock interrupted my thoughts. Enter. The door opened. Kelo stepped inside. For a moment neither of us spoke. The silence felt different now. Heavier. More meaningful. I wanted to confirm you were unharmed. I stared at him. Then laughed softly. You already asked me that. I know. Something about the answer made my chest ache. Not painfully. Just enough to remind me that certain feelings were becoming impossible to ignore. I walked toward the balcony. The city stretched beneath the night sky. Lights flickered throughout the capital. Thousands of people sleeping peacefully. Unaware of how close their king had come to dying. I owe you my life. The words emerged quietly. Kelo immediately shook his head. No. I turned. What? It was my duty. The answer frustrated me. Not because it was wrong. Because it wasn't enough. A duty could be assigned. A duty could be required. What Kelo had done felt different. More personal. More immediate. More human. You could have died. His expression remained calm. I didn't. The simplicity of the answer nearly drove me insane. How was he so composed about this? How? I stared at him. Really stared. And suddenly the truth became impossible to ignore. This wasn't merely attraction anymore. Not anymore. Attraction was noticing someone smile. Attraction was admiring how they looked. Attraction was harmless. What I felt now was different. Because when I saw that arrow flying toward me, I hadn't been afraid of dying. Not truly. The moment that terrified me was watching Kelo throw himself into danger. Watching him risk his life without hesitation. That was the moment that stayed with me. The moment I couldn't stop replaying. The moment that made my chest tighten every time I remembered it. And standing there beneath the moonlight, I finally understood why. I cared about him. Truly cared. Far more than I should. Far more than was wise. Far more than a king should ever allow himself to care about his knight. The realization was equal parts wonderful and terrifying. Because caring meant vulnerability. Caring meant risk. Caring meant loss. And I had already lost too much. Yet even knowing that, I couldn't change what I felt. Couldn't stop it. Couldn't deny it. Kelo met my gaze. Unaware of the storm unfolding inside me. Completely unaware. And perhaps that was for the best. Because some truths were too dangerous to speak aloud. Especially this one. Especially now. Yet as he bowed and prepared to leave, one thought followed me into the silence. I was no longer worried about whether Kelo returned my feelings. I was worried about something far worse. What would happen if one day he wasn't there at all?